In 1999, I was invited to do a radio show. This is one of these midnight shows where people call in and you need to answer their questions. And one of the persons called and said, listen, I've got this addiction to smoking. Can you help me? And then what I said is, listen, why don't you go take a shower? You know what? Why don't everybody listening to this program, if you're a smoker, go take a shower now. This is at about 12:30 in the night. And after the news at 1 o'clock, I'll do something to stop your smoking. Now, after I said that, the person in the room said to me, hey, what are you doing? This has never been done before. And I said, it's okay. I wasn't too sure myself, but I said, it's okay. And what I did is I did this treatment through my aura, but to the aura of the north of Israel.
You were surprised by the result?
I was absolutely surprised. People started calling in, and this is all live, and this is already being recorded, and people are calling in, listen, I was in the middle of a cigarette and the taste changed in my mouth, or I started throwing up, or I got nausea. And they were getting, their phone lines were jammed. They were getting phone call after phone call all the night. Over the next few weeks, people were still calling in, can we do that show again? Or a friend of mine stopped smoking last week and I wasn't on. And this little story was picked up by Israeli television, Channel 1. And they said, listen, you have to come and do this now on television. Actually, they didn't say you have to come and do it. They said, can you come down to television and tell us about what you did? And they invited with me also one of the people who had stopped smoking over the radio. I didn't know. I came into the television place and there's this guy sitting there and they say, you know who he is? And I said, no. And he says, he stopped smoking a few weeks ago when you did that radio show. And we invited you here to talk about it. So I said, okay, what would you like to know? And they said, well, can you do it now, live? And this is 7 in the morning, Channel 1, live morning show, this is Israel. And I said, okay, I can try, but I don't know, I've never done this before. I'm willing to try. Now, I've got a letter of thanks from the television. They said they've never had so many phone calls coming in. And they interviewed people, I mean, hundreds of people stopped smoking that morning. So what we're talking about here, it's not just a kind of a imaginary, maybe fairy tale story about the aura. This is the most amazing thing. This is magic. This is wonder. And for me, I mean, those things, I need to kind of reread the letters I got from people saying thank you, just to remind myself that I actually should believe in the higher levels of possibility. I mean, nowadays I treat people through the Skype. They send me a picture on the internet and I treat them. And it works. The thing is, I was born in a normal house in Haifa to my parents who never believed in these things. The one is a doctor, the other is a musicologist. They're not into this stuff. And anyone who's interested in these things just needs to learn about them. I mean, I was interested, I was intrigued, it caught my attention. I was at the right place at the right time, I met the right people. Okay, but here, you're hearing about this now. Anyone can take this and do something about their life. Now, I'll tell you something. It's maybe a bit funny, but I'll say it anyway. You see, in my aura, I have the history of growing up in a professor's house. I have the fact that I went to a very special school where these things were not spoken about. It's in my aura, strong. It's in my history. Now, when things happen, sometimes I find myself not sure what world I'm in, because on the one hand, people say, you just did this. And on the other hand, something in me, little Udi in the background is saying, hey, come on, what are you talking about? It's not scientific, yeah? But somehow both of them live in me. And I think the more time I spend with these unseen worlds, the more it takes space up in my aura. That little something kind of gets smaller and smaller. But it's there, it's in my aura. Often I'm asked about where did this all begin? I'm dealing with the aura, I'm dealing with people's bioenergy, I'm doing treatments around the world. But where did it all start? Now, if I go back, my grandfather was a rabbi, and my father is a doctor. And I think somewhere in between these two things, I found myself being very interested in human beings, in health, but also in the more religious aspect, or maybe the where do we come from, where do we go? And that's always been with me since I was a child. I remember that at a certain age, I realized that these things that I deal with is not what everybody else does, because I used to answer people's questions before they asked them, or I used to say things before they happened. And it used to trouble people, and people kind of related to me in a strange, in a weird way when I did these things, but I thought it was totally natural. I didn't know that it was strange until I realized that there is something different about how I am and other people. I always had animals at home. Always had like a menagerie, a whole zoo. And people used to bring animals that were sick, or if a bird broke a wing, and they used to bring them over, and I used to take care of them. And they'd feel better, and they'd heal, and they'd fly away or go back. And for me that was just natural. Now at a certain point I started getting more and more interested in what is an aura, because I'm talking about now about 30 years ago, when all these things were not common knowledge. There wasn't the internet. You couldn't go and buy a book about the aura. And I was seeing things. I could see things around people. I could feel things that other people didn't exactly feel. And I wanted to try and understand this. And this is in my teen years. I was about 14, 15, 16. I started reading anything I can get hold of. Books by Carlos Castaneda, books about healing, books about ancient tribes that said they could do all kinds of things. And I began to realize that there are forms of knowledge that I wasn't taught at school, that were not part of how I grew up. And then I met some people. And then I started to get more interested. I went after the army. In the army I was a paramedic, and I studied how to heal people in the conventional military way. But every time people would be in the clinic, in the military clinic, things would happen which were kind of strange. Like people would come in with an ailment, but also a bad headache, and the headache would disappear. Or people would come and they had some kind of disorder. I would be treating their wound or a gunshot, and at the same time, suddenly they'd stop smoking. And these kind of stories started getting around, and then there was an article in a newspaper and something on TV about me, which is actually when I realized there's much more about this that I don't know. At this time, people would ask me, what are you doing? What is this something that you do? And I said, I don't really know, but it's to do with transference of energy. And that's actually what I call it today. When people ask me, what do you do? I say, I use the aura for transference of energy. I went to university. I went to study. I studied a couple of years in university biology. When I went from studying biology to studying the psychology, I learned a lot of great things. I was doing a course in Kabbalah, and at the same time I was studying ancient cultures of Egypt, and I was learning philosophy, and I was learning amazing things. But during that time I realized still there's something I was looking for they didn't have the answers for.